It was a bright and bustling morning in the city, the sun shining down on the cobbled streets where people hurried about, each with their own purpose. But if one ventured a little further off the beaten path, to a narrow, almost hidden alleyway, they would find a shop unlike any other. The name above the door read Pam's Touch, though it seemed as though the letters themselves shimmered in a peculiar way. It was a lavish wig parlor that promised to bring out the best in every woman who walked through its doors. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary beauty salon, offering high-quality wigs. But as anyone who had ever set foot inside would tell you, Pam's Touch was far from ordinary. The store was always packed with customers, some wealthy and influential, other students just beginning to experience the world of beauty and self-expression. The wigs were immaculate, hand-picked from the finest sources, and shaped with an expert's touch. Those who walked into Pam's Touch often left with a new sense of pride in their appearance, and the transformation was immediate. No one seemed to question the strangely compelling allure of the shop, and it wasn't just the quality of the wigs that kept people coming back. Strangely, most clients felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction after their visit, an inexplicable joy in their hearts as they left the shop. They would admire themselves in mirrors, run their fingers through their new hair, and step out of the store feeling not only more beautiful but somehow more confident and powerful. It was as though the wig had unlocked something inside them, something they had never known was missing. But there was an unsettling consistency to the stories shared by these customers. Each one spoke of an unspoken rule when they entered the store, a rule that had been laid out by Madame Pam herself. "Do not return your wig," they were told with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. And never, under any circumstances, wear it in the rain or at night. Most shrugged it off, thinking it was just part of the store's strange, exclusive vibe. After all, who would question the wisdom of someone who ran such a renowned establishment? But it wasn't long before strange occurrences started to happen. Take the story of Amara, a university student who had come to Pam's Touch to find a wig for a prestigious event. She had heard of the place from her friends, and they all raved about how perfect their wigs were, how their lives had been changed by the beauty they wore. Amara had long struggled with self-esteem, always feeling as though she wasn't pretty enough for the world around her. So when she arrived at the store and was greeted by the charming Madame Pam, she felt as though her prayers had been answered. Madame Pam had shown her a sleek, raven black wig that shimmered in the light, offering a vision of elegance and confidence. As soon as Amara wore it, she was amazed by the instant transformation. She looked at herself in the mirror, and the girl who stared back at her seemed almost unrecognizable, a more polished version of herself, full of poise and grace. She felt more confident walking into her event that evening, but something strange started to happen as the night wore on. The longer she wore the wig, the more she felt an overpowering urge to speak, to command attention. She found herself becoming the center of every conversation. Yet, a dark feeling gnawed at her. She began to feel as though she was no longer in full control of her actions, like something outside of herself was pulling the strings. When Amara returned home after the event, she felt an unusual emptiness. Her confidence had faded, replaced by an anxiety she hadn't known before. It was as if the wig had taken a part of her that she couldn't quite get back. She tried to sleep, but the dreams were unsettling, vivid and strange, full of shadows that seemed to chase her through a forest of endless wigs. The next morning, her reflection in the mirror looked odd, as if the confidence from the night before had become permanent, leaving her feeling both powerful and frightened. Her friends noticed the change too, but when she tried to share her unease with them, they laughed, calling her paranoid. "It's just a wig, Amara. You look amazing," they said. But Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. Then there was Mrs. Ndidi, a wealthy businesswoman who had been a regular at Pam's Touch for years. She had never questioned the strange atmosphere of the store, nor the unusual rules Madam Pam gave her clients. She had been one of the first to buy a wig from Pam's Touch, and her life seemed to flourish as she wore the wigs, each one making her feel more empowered and beautiful than the last. But over time, Mrs. Ndidi began to notice changes in herself. She started making decisions she normally wouldn't, pushing away colleagues, rejecting long-standing business partnerships, and becoming more ruthless in her dealings. She no longer took time to care for her relationships, choosing instead to focus solely on herself. Her wealth grew, but so did a gnawing emptiness inside her. At one point, Mrs. Ndidi found herself staring at her reflection one afternoon, touching the wig she had been wearing for months. For the first time, she noticed something odd. Her hairline beneath the wig had started to recede. She lifted the wig cautiously, and what she saw made her stomach churn. Her natural hair had begun to thin rapidly. It was as though the wig was taking something from her, a vitality that she couldn't get back. She returned to Pam's Touch to ask Madam Pam about it, but when she arrived, the store was eerily empty. No customers. No staff. And Madam Pam was nowhere to be found. Mrs. Ndidi had a sinking feeling as she stood in the center of the shop, realizing that perhaps she had been under a spell all along, one she was only now beginning to unravel. It wasn't just these two women. Countless others experienced the same inexplicable pull, the same sense of magnetic attraction to the wigs. Women came and went, always returning to Pam's Touch again and again, each time feeling more beautiful, more assured, and more connected to the world around them. But there was a lingering sadness in their eyes, a subtle change that couldn't be ignored. Some felt as though they were losing parts of themselves with every new wig they bought, as if they were handing over their identity to the magic of the store. They began to question their own reflections, wondering whether they were still themselves or if they had become a mere extension of the wigs they wore. Each return visit only deepened the allure, pulling them back to Pam's Touch like moths to a flame. Most astonishing of all, however, was how few seemed to question the growing unease around them. There was a sense of peace, a calming voice in the back of their minds, telling them not to worry, telling them that this was simply part of the beauty and power they now possessed. And for the longest time, it worked. The doubts were suppressed, and the clients left feeling satisfied, too mesmerized by the elegance they now carried to care about anything else. But even in their satisfaction, something was wrong. And the more they returned, the harder it became to ignore the faint but growing whispers of dread that accompanied their visits. Deep inside their hearts, they began to realize that they were no longer in full control. Pam's Touch, despite its allure, was not what it appeared to be. Beneath the luxurious surface, there was a dark magic at play, an enchantment that had gripped every client who entered, binding them to its will. And as they left the store each time, they carried with them more than just a new wig. They carried a secret. And the price they would pay for that secret was a price they could never escape. Madam Pam was a woman of striking beauty and poise. Her skin glowed like polished ebony, and her hair, a cascade of thick, glossy black curls, was the envy of every woman who walked into her store. She always moved with an effortless grace, her flowing dresses adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the shop. To her clients, Madame Pam was an embodiment of perfection, a woman who had mastered the art of elegance and success. But behind her charming smile and the luxurious atmosphere of Pam's touch, there lay a secret so dark that no one could have imagined the truth. Pam was not just a wig maker, she was a master of ancient black magic. Her stunning beauty and the overwhelming allure of her store were not mere coincidences but the result of years of delving into forbidden arts. She had made a pact with forces far beyond human understanding, and it was this pact that fueled her success. Years ago, when Pam was a struggling wig maker trying to survive in a competitive world, she stumbled upon an old woman who changed the course of her life forever. The woman was a recluse, feared and shunned by the community for her eerie knowledge of the occult. Desperate for success and tired of being overlooked, Pam sought her out, begging for a way to stand out among her peers. The old woman offered her a simple choice: to remain ordinary or to embrace a power that would grant her wealth, beauty, and success beyond her wildest dreams. But there was a cost. Pam would have to bind her soul to an ancient spirit, a shadowy entity that fed on human essence. The more she fed the spirit, the more it would grant her gifts in return. Driven by ambition and frustration, Pam agreed. The woman performed a dark ritual, tying Pam's spirit to the entity and giving her the secret to enchanting objects with its power. She showed Pam how to infuse wigs with magic that could enhance the wearer's beauty and confidence, making them addicted to the wigs and, in turn, to Pam herself. The entity would feed on the essence of her clients, their vitality, their dreams, even pieces of their soul, whenever they wore the enchanted wigs. In return, Pam would grow more beautiful, her shop more successful, and her influence more far-reaching. Each wig at Pam's touch was carefully prepared in a secret chamber hidden beneath the store. The chamber was a chilling space lit by flickering candles, its walls lined with ancient symbols drawn in chalk and blood. At the center of the room stood a wooden table where Madame Pam performed her rituals. The process was meticulous and sinister. Each wig was placed on the table, and Pam would chant incantations in a language long forgotten by the world. As her words filled the air, the shadows in the room would come alive, swirling around the wig like a dark mist. The spirit she had bound herself to would infuse the wig with its power, creating a spell that linked the wig to its future wearer. Once the enchantment was complete, Pam would sprinkle the wig with a fine, glittering powder made from crushed bones and rare herbs. The powder was the final seal, ensuring the connection between the wig and the client could never be broken. Each wig carried a specific enchantment tailored to the desires of its wearer. For some, it amplified beauty, making their faces glow with an unearthly charm. For others, it granted confidence, transforming shy, reserved women into commanding, powerful figures. But there was always a hidden cost. A piece of the wearer's essence was siphoned away with each use, feeding the entity and further binding them to Madame Pam's influence. Pam's deal with the spirit brought her everything she had ever dreamed of. Her beauty became ageless, her hair thick and luxurious, her skin flawless. Women marveled at her appearance, wondering how she managed to look so radiant despite her age. Her shop flourished, drawing clients from all walks of life. Politicians' wives, celebrities, wealthy socialites, and even young students came to Pam's touch, eager to experience the magic of her wigs. With each client, Pam's influence grew. She was no longer just a wig maker, she was a gatekeeper of power and beauty, a woman who could transform lives with a single touch of her hand. But there was more. Pam gained something far greater than material wealth or physical beauty. With every piece of essence taken from her clients, she grew stronger. Her connection to the spirit deepened, granting her abilities that went beyond the natural world. She could sense emotions, manipulate thoughts, and even glimpse fragments of the future. Her clients became like puppets, their lives subtly influenced by her whims. Pam reveled in her power, basking in the adoration of her clients. To her, they were nothing more than vessels, tools to feed the spirit and keep her at the pinnacle of success. While Pam flourished, her clients suffered in ways they could not fully understand. The Wigs worked their magic, giving them the beauty and confidence they craved, but the effects were never permanent. Over time, they began to notice subtle changes in themselves. Some experienced physical symptoms, hair loss, weight fluctuations, fatigue that no amount of rest could cure. Others felt it on a deeper level. They became restless, unable to find satisfaction in anything except the moments they wore their wigs. Their relationships began to crumble, their sense of self eroded by an emptiness they couldn't explain. One client, a young teacher named Ife, found herself losing control of her thoughts. She had purchased a wig to boost her confidence in the classroom, but as time went on, she began to feel as though the wig had a will of its own. She would say things she didn't mean, act in ways that shocked even herself. It was as if she were no longer the one in control. Another woman, a successful banker named Ndozi, became obsessed with her appearance. She spent hours staring at herself in the mirror, unable to look away. The wig made her feel invincible, but when she took it off, she felt hollow and vulnerable. She started neglecting her work, her family, and her friends, all for the fleeting high the wig gave her. The true horror of Pam's magic lay in its subtlety. The wigs did not destroy their wearers outright. Instead, they eroded their essence piece by piece, leaving them dependent on Pam for their sense of self-worth. The more they wore the wigs, the more they craved them, and the harder it became to imagine life without them. Pam's clients would return to the store time and again, seeking newer, better wigs to replace the ones they had bought before. They didn't realize that they were feeding a cycle of destruction, each purchase drawing them deeper into Pam's web of enchantment. And yet, none of them questioned her. The wigs worked too well, giving them everything they thought they wanted. It wasn't until it was too late that some began to realize the truth, that the beauty and power they had gained came at the cost of their own souls. Madame Pam knew all of this, of course. She watched as her clients fell under her spell, their lives unraveling bit by bit. And she smiled, for their loss was her gain. As long as the spirit remained fed, Pam would remain untouchable, a queen in her kingdom of shadows. One afternoon, a young lady named Grace walked into Pam's touch. She was a staunch Christian and the daughter of Pastor Elijah, a powerful man known for his unwavering faith and authority in the town. Grace had heard the whispers of the parlor's magic but was skeptical. She did not believe in such things and simply came for a new wig to add to her collection. When she entered, she was greeted by Madame Pam with a warm smile. Pam was quick to notice the purity in Grace's eyes, the strength of her faith. But Madame Pam was not one to shy away from a challenge. She knew she could bring even the most faithful under her spell. "Welcome, dear," Pam said, her voice smooth like honey. "I have just the perfect wig for you. It will make you look like a queen." Grace hesitated but eventually agreed. She chose a long, golden wig that shimmered in the light. The moment she placed it on her head, something strange happened. She felt a surge of power, a feeling of complete transformation. Her reflection in the mirror seemed almost divine, glowing with an unearthly beauty. Without a second thought, Grace paid and left the store. When Grace returned home, she was excited to show her new look to her father, Pastor Elijah. She knew her father had always been critical of her appearance, always telling her to focus on her inner beauty. But today, she felt different. Today, she felt as though the wig had given her something her father had never fully understood, a confidence she had never felt before. Pastor Elijah noticed the change immediately. "Grace," he said, his voice filled with concern, "what is this? Why do you look so different?" Grace smiled, running her fingers through her long golden hair. "It's a new wig, Father. Pam's touch. It's amazing." Pastor Elijah's brow furrowed. He had heard of Pam's touch but had always dismissed it as a simple wig store. He had never trusted businesses that catered to vanity, especially those with mysterious rules. But something about the wig disturbed him. There was something unnatural about it. He knew this was no ordinary wig. His sharp spiritual senses told him something was wrong. His daughter had become entranced by it. That night, as Grace lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gripped her. The wig, though beautiful, felt heavy on her head, like a weight that she couldn't remove. She tried to take it off, but the moment her fingers touched it, her hands trembled, and she felt a sharp jolt of energy running through her body. She quickly pulled her hands back, feeling a strange force pull her back to the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was not just her, it was someone more powerful, someone who held all the confidence she had ever dreamed of. But it wasn't her. The wig's enchantment had already begun to work its magic, weaving a spell that took hold of her soul. Grace was trapped in its allure. Pastor Elijah could not sleep. He spent the entire night praying, asking God to reveal the truth about the strange wig his daughter had purchased. He knew that there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface of Pam's touch. It was a force that was beyond human understanding, and he needed to uncover it before it claimed his daughter's soul. The next morning, he visited the store himself. He entered with caution, his senses heightened by years of spiritual training. The shop was as beautiful as ever, but there was an unsettling energy that lingered in the air. Madam Pam greeted him with the same sweet smile. "Welcome, Pastor Elijah. How may I assist you today?" she asked, her voice like silk. "I've come to speak about my daughter," Pastor Elijah said, his tone firm. "She bought a wig from this store, and I need to know what kind of magic you are using here." Madam Pam's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "There is no magic here, Pastor. Only beauty. Only the finest wigs for those who seek to feel more beautiful." But Pastor Elijah could sense the darkness in her words. He knew she was hiding something. Pastor Elijah's fears were confirmed when he returned home and found Grace sitting in front of the mirror, her hands gripping the edges as if she were afraid to let go. Her eyes were wide, vacant, as though she were in a trance. "Grace," he called out. "What's happening to you?" Grace turned to him, but her gaze was distant. "Father, it's the wig. It's so beautiful. I feel powerful. I can take it off." "Grace, listen to me," Pastor Elijah cried, rushing toward her. "This is not right. You have been deceived." But Grace could not hear him. The magic of the wig had fully taken hold of her. Pastor Elijah knew that the only way to break the spell was to confront Madam Pam and destroy the source of the magic. He gathered his church leaders and led them to Pam's touch. They prayed and sang hymns, their voices rising in unity as they approached the door of the parlor. Inside, Madam Pam stood, waiting for them. She had been expecting this moment. "You think you can destroy what I have built?" she said with a cold laugh. "You think your prayers can break my magic?" But Pastor Elijah was determined. "In the name of the Lord, I command you to release my daughter and every soul you have entranced with your dark magic." A fierce battle ensued, with light clashing against darkness. The power of the church's faith collided with the black magic that had permeated the store. Finally, with a loud, thunderous sound, the enchantments shattered, and the store began to collapse. Pam's touch crumbled to the ground as the last remnants of Madam Pam's magic were torn away. The wigs in the store were reduced to ash, and the enchantments dissolved into the air. Madam Pam, defeated, disappeared into the shadows. She had been consumed by her own dark magic, and the power she once held was no more. Grace, freed from the enchantment, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She looked at her father, who held her tightly. "I'm sorry, Father," she whispered. Pastor Elijah smiled gently. "It's not your fault, my child. We will rebuild from this." And with that, Pam's touch was no more, its dark legacy erased by the power of faith and the light of truth. Did you enjoy the story? I hope so. Please like and share the video, drop your comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Thanks for watching and see you on the next.